everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Dig. I'm Jamie, and I'm your host. Today, we're going to be talking about setters, and of course, we're not going to cover everything that's involved with setting, but we're really going to cover a lot of your most frequently asked questions. So, if you're interested in learning anything about setting, go ahead and stick around, and we will be covering it in just a second. But first, I want to tell you that our sponsor is My Little Athlete. If you need anything, gifts or apparel for this volleyball season, check out mylittleathlete.biz. The very first question that I want to address is setting important? Is the setter role on the team important? And it's definitely important. If you were watching football and they didn't have a quarterback, well, they would probably lose. And it's the same thing with volleyball and setting. Setters run the offense. So without a good setter, it's going to be a lot harder to score. If you are a setter, that's how you need to be thinking about the game. Not necessarily running around and just trying to put the ball in the air. But eventually, when you start to get better and better and your team gets more dialed in, you want to be thinking, how can I get my team to score? And what kind of set do I need to be setting in order to set my hitters up for success? So early on when you're setting, you might just be learning technique and things like that. And maybe just putting the ball up and knowing like who your best hitter is or your most consistent hitter is. Well, that's really good. But as you get better and everyone, like the opponents and everything get better, then you're really going to want to be thinking about how do we score? What kind of offense are we running? How fast is our offense? So those are questions that you should be talking to your coach about and really trying to dial in your offense. So if you want to be a good setter, you really should be practicing all the time. Setting is one of the most challenging, I think it is probably the most challenging position mentally and physically, like the combination of the two. It's really challenging, but it's actually really easy to practice. A lot of the other positions, if you're an outside, well, hitting and passing isn't quite as easy to practice on your own. Of course, you can do it, but it's harder. Where setters, if you can spend an extra, 10 to 15 minutes every day and you have a ball and a wall, you can become pretty darn efficient. I would suggest that you make sure that you know exactly how your hand should be placed around the ball. You want your fingers, all your fingers and your thumbs contacting the ball if you can. Sometimes your pinkies might not contact, but as much surface area as you can cover on the ball, you want to. Do not use the palm of your hand. So we talk about fingertips, but it's probably a little more than fingertips. It's probably more like the finger, but not the palm, if that makes sense. And then you also really want to make sure that your index fingers are the same distance apart as your thumbs. If your index fingers get too close together, your elbows will get wide. And if your thumbs get too close together, your elbows are too narrow. And that will hinder how much strength and push you have in your set. So really try to get your index fingers and your thumbs about the same distance apart, and depending on how big your hands are will determine how far apart they should be on the ball, but it's somewhere around 2 inches or so apart. You can take a panel on the ball, like how the balls have the different colored panels and stuff. You can take one of those that are all going the same way and put your hands around it. I hope that makes sense. And kind of get an idea of the shape of the ball. Now, when you go to set, if you're a younger setter or you have a lot of trouble with power, really make sure that your elbows are bent. So you run to the ball, you get under it. When you put your hands on top of your head, make sure that your elbows are nice and bent. And wait for the ball to contact you. Don't go out to the ball. Wait till you feel the contact on your fingers and then push. If you start pushing before the ball contacts your hands, you're only going to lose power. You're not going to have very much push if your elbows are already straight. So make sure that your elbows are nice and bent. I should have mentioned before that your wrists need to be bent also. Go ahead and look at your hands. And if you have, flat hands, and your palms are facing down, so just put it in front of you, palm facing down. You want to lift your thumb back towards your nose, and you really want to make sure that your wrists have bend. Look at the wrinkles on your wrists. It'll show you if you're bending your wrists or not. You really need to make sure you have bend and flexibility in your wrists. So then when you actually go to set, you want to extend. You want to extend your elbows straight and you want to extend your wrists straight. And that's going to add a lot of power. And the faster you extend, the more power you're going to have. So those two things, a lot of people have trouble with delivering the ball far enough. I get asked all the time, how do I set my sets further or higher? And those are the two main principles to setting them further and higher. The other thing that you might need to be doing is using your legs to set. So, left, right, push into the ball. You kind of establish a left-right rhythm, bend your knees, extend, and then extend your knees. But really, if you are having troubles pushing the ball out, the volleyball is really not that heavy. So if you're having troubles, you're good chance you're not bending your elbows or your wrists enough. Let's see, other things. If the ball is spinning when you set, then you're probably, more than likely, you're not extending your hands and you're not releasing the ball evenly with both hands. One hand is probably doing something different than the other hand, and that's going to cause spin. Make sure that when you release, your index fingers and your thumbs stay the same distance apart. One isn't pushing harder or faster than the other hand. Both hands are pushing together like if they were taped together, like they couldn't do things independently. They're doing the exact same thing at the same time. And then pushing all the way straight through the ball and straight through the entire set. If you finish kind of halfway through, then you can add some spin to the ball. But that's probably more than likely what's happening if you spin. The other thing that might be happening is your thumbs might be poking out. If you spend a second here and put your hands on top of your head, and then look at your hands. If your hands are making like two ball shapes, like if it looks like you're holding two apples on top of your head, then you're going to have poor contact on the ball. You want to make it look like you're holding one big watermelon. So your thumbs need to be pulled out and back towards your eyes. So again, take a look in the mirror. Mirror is great for any skills so that you can actually see yourself. It's like dancers. They dance in front of a mirror so they can see exactly what they're doing. You as a volleyball player should try that also. So yeah, you don't want two apples on top of your head. You want one big watermelon. Let's see. How tall do you need to be if you want to be a setter? That's a really good question. A lot of times people get put in the setting position because they're short. There's really no reason behind it other than early on taller players, coaches want their taller players hitting. But if you're short, you definitely can still play setter depending on how advanced the competition is. If the other team is really good at hitting, they're just really good, and you're really short, well then your coach probably won't want you blocking. It has way more to do with blocking than it does with setting. If you're really tall and you're a setter, like that's great. In fact, the best colleges in the country, their setters are pretty tall. They're not, 5'3" girls. They're 5'11", 6 foot, and they're able to block. And so if you want to be a front row setter, then I would advise you to learn how to attack and stuff, but you're going to have to become a decent blocker. The exception is if you're playing against teams whose outside hitters aren't great at hitting down the line, the coach may be willing to give up a block in favor of your good setting. So if you're really, really good at setting, and the other hitters aren't going over you, they're not talented enough to see you as a short blocker and go over you, then they may just go with you in the front row setting. So I hope that answered your questions. Height is, it's all relative. Who are you playing against and how good are they? Who else do you have on your team? For every position, height is just relative. It doesn't really matter. It has a lot more to do with the skill. I guess I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. It does matter, but I can't really help with that. The more advanced the team is, the taller it tends to get. So in the front row, at least. Mentally, what do I look for in a setter? What do other coaches look for in a setter? Most coaches agree that setters need to be a leader of some kind, whether that's vocally or emotionally or just working really hard. Most coaches are going to agree that the setter is the leader on the team. Now, if you're not a natural born leader, that's okay. You don't have to be. And you don't have to be the leader as in you're coming up with cheers and firing people up before the game. The setter as a leader needs to be somebody who's confident in what they're doing. They need to be somebody who is out there working hard all the time. You really need to be the rock of your team. You need to be trustworthy. If people are not sure if you're really going to try for the ball or not, then they're going to have a really hard time trusting you and things are going to fall apart. So definitely be a really hard worker on the team and make sure that you are, staying level-headed. You don't want to be the person who has breakdowns and stuff and really goes up and down. Setters need to be pretty consistently, just every play they do their best and don't get too high or too low. Other things I look for in a setter. Setters need to be looking for opportunities to score. I mentioned that earlier. But as setters get better, you need to be thinking of your role as offense. Like, how do we find ways to score points? Let me just take a look, see if I have any other questions here. Improving accuracy. Accuracy is super important to a setter. If you want to improve your accuracy, we walked through the fundamentals of it. You really want to have good, solid fundamentals, and you need a lot of practice. Same thing with every skill. To become more accurate, you need to be practicing it more and more often. That's about it for my specific setter questions. Now, I think I'm going to make a little movie or a little video of some kind showing some different setter drills, like maybe just like a 5-minute against the wall thing that you guys can be doing, because setting, it really is one of the easiest things you can do at home. And if you're a setter, I said this in the beginning, it's probably the toughest role to play because it's demanding physically and mentally, but it's also the easiest to practice. And so I'm going to probably do something, but in the meantime, before I get that done, go ahead and set against the wall every day. Stand a foot away or so the ball's really only moving about 6 inches, and try to get where you don't have to bend your elbows at all. You're just using your wrists to set and get really good and fast, and then slow it down. I'd spend some time catching, set, catch, where you're keeping your hands above your head. You're still nice and close to the wall, but instead of setting the ball straight back into the wall, go ahead and catch it. So let it come in, hold, take a look at your hands, make sure that you like the shape of them, and then send it back to the wall and catch again and fix the shape, and just keep fixing the shape over and over and over again, because the shape of your hands is it's just so important. So I think that's it. If you have any more questions for me, you can always find me at volleyball_challenge on Instagram. You can email me. You can find my email and stuff on My Little Athlete. I think we'll go mylittleathlete.biz/setters, and we'll do a whole post on setter stuff. And in the future, if I add some videos and things, drills you can do, it'll be there. So mylittleathlete.biz/setters. And I hope something in here helped you in some way. And until next time, goodbye.